But the more important thing is, first of all, I'm going to tell you something you already know, so forgive me. AI is not your doctor, and it never will be. And I'll tell you a few different reasons why. First and foremost, AI doesn't know anything about you unless you tell it. AI is not going to ask you a contextual question based on your answers. Your doctor sitting across from you, who you've got a relationship with because you've been seeing them for a few years, if they're asking you how you're doing and you really not certain you want to expose everything, you're going to tell them I'm doing fine. But the doctors read on things. If he knows you, he's going to know to have a follow-up question because he knows that something's up. He can see it in your body language. He might hear it in your tone. He might be able to see physical manifestations of whatever's going on. So these things alone are things that your AI can never do, and they'll never be able to. The other major thing that, from my standpoint, is the context on your behalf as the person who's using the tool. Let's say you have had a crazy, crazy bout of migraine headaches and you've been trying to solve it yourself and you ask your ChatGPT, what do I do about these migraines? It's going to register what you would think. It's going to register, okay, he's got a headache. Does it understand the severity of the headache? Have you explained that in your prompt? Probably not, right? You just say it hurts, which most people would say. What's happened prior to that? What's your medical history? I'll give you a good example. Are you diabetic? It's not going to ask you that. But is there any correlation to that condition? Could it have some kind of an impact? Or more importantly, is the medication you're taking from it having an impact? And what is the medication and what's the dose? I don't know about you, but I take medications that I've had prescriptions for. I can't remember the name of it, much less pronounce it. I really don't know the dosage off the top of my head. That's just a simple example. Would it be relevant to know that yesterday I fell down and I think I might have cracked an elbow? I don't know if that's relevant to my headache. I wouldn't naturally just put it there. These are just simple examples. These are contextual things that a normal human being, it's not clinically trained, doesn't really know what the protocols are. These are things that are just natural. We're going to ask the questions that we have, and we're not going to recall or think about what could also be related. This is one of the most important things that you really want to keep in mind if you want to use these tools. And my bigger concerns are really two. First of all, it's bias. And not the kind of bias that you're probably thinking about when I say it. Yes, there's a bias, meaning that depending on the region and the population center that you're in, there may very well be some gaps because of the composition of the community. If you're in a primarily French-speaking area, we have those in this country, or Spanish-speaking places, you're going to have a people group and a culture that's really specific. And it's not going to take into account any of the outlying groups that are not represented in higher numbers. And that's where the concern is, because you can't assume that you've got your model accurate if you don't have the whole picture, even in a single community. And that's a really significant thing to just keep in your mind, because you and I, even if we look the same, our DNA is not. There are no two people who have the same DNA. Never has been that scenario. If you understand what happens in healthcare in terms of the incentives for compliance or inequality, there's requirements, and it actually impacts your compensation from the insurers. You've got to really make sure that you're getting things right, because nobody is average. These things are built on averages and composites. And so the average person has all these different characteristics, which is never true because we're calculating averages. You don't want to do an average on an average. And it's basically as messed up as that is. So the targets that are set for physicians to actually hit are just way off just for that reason. And there's never going to be someone that actually matches these profiles. So back to the utilization of it, the risks. You're not asking the right questions and you don't know what the right questions are. It may flag something for you. It's no big deal. Take a couple Advil or whatever, and you're not going to make an appointment. But if there's other things going on, because you didn't know to ask it, you might find yourself in an emergency room. Not desirable, but preventable with the context available. The other scenario is it may actually steer you to go to the ER when you don't really need to go there. You're giving it a blood pressure that seems a little abnormally high based on models that are defined inside the platform, not based on your medical history, but based on those models. It may send an alert to your physician, and your physician's going to look at the notes. He's going to look at your history, and he's going to say, why are you bothering me with this? Because this is normal. It's controlled. That's their controlled level. And they're taking medications that are achieving that. That's not normal for everybody, but it is normal for you as an individual. We don't come in bunches like grapes, everyone. That's really the bottom line on this thing. You really need to make sure that you're understanding you are a unique individual and you need people who are going to understand you and ask the questions that help them to understand you so that they can really come up with the right solutions and recommendations to help improve your healthcare. You can think about this from so many different angles, but having a false positive or a false negative, those are the extremes that really concern me. But even more so is that middle space in between. If you were like me when the Waze app came out, I started to use that. It was frustrating for a little while because it took them a while to get things dialed in. But after a little while, it's a no-brainer. I stopped looking up things on a map. I don't even know if I can find my maps in my house anymore. But too quickly, I got comfortable with it. And I'll tell you what happened to me, and if maybe it's happened to you. The first time I drove in New York City, I found out it really was not helpful for that because you're in an area that is so compacted. It really was not dialed in to the point where it could give you the information in time because it's not timed to the traffic lights. It's not timed to know when there's going to be a jam or whatever it is. You might actually get 2 blocks further than you want to be and before it tells you you should be turning. These are the types of scenarios that concern me because we tend to adopt technology very, very quickly. If you get the right answer 2 or 3 times, you're going to trust. This is not one of those examples of technology that you need to be comfortable with. You need to always challenge it. Again, because it's not designed to maintain the entire context of and knowledge of you as an individual and what's important to you, what your medical history is, what your family medical history, and is that important? I think it is, particularly if you're having any concerns with blood pressure. Those things are really important to know. Does ChatGPT know to ask you what your family history is? Maybe it does, and maybe that gives you comfort. But what else is missing from a data standpoint? And that missing piece of information is the part that's most concerning. And physicians have always had this. 2 questions. What don't I know? And how important is it? And what are the consequences of the thing that I don't know? And your doctors are thinking about this, by the way, because the only reason they went into medicine is probably not for reasons that you even think. Let me give you context for just a second. Who wants to sign up to go to 10 to 12 years of training, accumulating a mountain of debt? And we're not talking a couple 100,000. We're talking well north of $1 million. And I can't afford to go into practice for myself because someone's going to sue me. So I have to have malpractice insurance, and I can't afford to pay that bill and still pay off my loans and have a family. And oh, by the way, the other really motivating thing is I'm going to go to work, and the day I start, I'm going to have a patient caseload. And every day after that, I'm going to have administrators coming to me and trying to get me to see more patients. A variety of reasons for that. People don't like to think about it, but hospitals are run in a more complicated way, the way that you run your house. You have to have electricity. You have to have food, water, waste disposal. Hospitals have to have those things too. So if you're paying more for your gas and your oil, your health system is too. If you're paying more for your food, your hospital is too. So these things are something to really keep in mind. And these are really important factors when you're thinking about how you engage. I don't like the fact that it's more expensive all the time, but it is for everybody. So they're going to do the things that are most efficient. And I'm a physician, just started out. I get to go and deal with that pressure, the threat that someone's going to sue me. But the bigger concern I have is if I make a mistake, it could hurt someone. And this is a workload they carry on their shoulders every day. I spoke with a pediatric nurse practitioner recently, and I asked her what it was like going in and out of exam rooms all day because she has a young family of herself. And it's not something that she's been asked very often. But that's the kind of the things that you're dealing with as a physician. So that pressure just mounts. You think about your own family as you're looking at a little kid who you may or not be able to help. And you walk out of the room and someone's pushing you to go do the next thing. These are the things that these people are, I'm just going to say it. These are heroic people to me. Physicians, nurses, people who do this kind of work because they're seeing things that really crush them on a daily basis. When you are not feeling well and you're not doing well, they carry that weight. And I'm not saying everybody does, but I've not very many that don't feel that way. And that's a really important factor to bear in mind. We really need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can do to support with technology, the things that preserve and protect that interaction that you have with your clinician. Make sure they have everything at their disposal to help you. And you want to make sure that if you are going to engage and use these technologies, just don't take it as gospel. They're not your doctor. You're going to put yourself at risk in a way that you may not even understand if you don't think through and actually have a conversation. Because if you're like me, I don't want to be bothering people unnecessarily, so I might not pick up the phone and call. But if you're getting any answers that seem overly confident or really not confident at all, if you call the doctor's office, more often than not, you're going to get somebody on the other end of the phone you can have a conversation with, and they'll help you. They'll clarify. They'll tell you if you need to be seen. But you don't want to trust the judgment of the tool because it doesn't have judgment. You don't want to trust your own judgment unless you're a medical professional.